Guys, there's a man in the studio. Guys, there's a man in the studio. But is this really an intruder, or is this an allegory for the importance of men in feminist conversations? It's probably the second part because everything we do is intentional on this podcast. We always like to highlight women on the Rose and Ceilings podcast and talk about how important highlighting women's voices are. But it also is kind of important to recognize that male allyship is a super important part of the movement, which is why this is not an intruder on the podcast. This is our first ever male guest on the Rose and the Ceilings podcast.
Oh my gosh, to our beloved listeners, making his podcast debut, this is the first man to ever enter the sacred recording space. Please welcome to this show, Nonit.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, guys. Nana is a close friend of ours, and we felt that there wasn't any better candidate to come on and talk to us about this. There wasn't any better candidate to be our first male guest. Nana, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So, my name is Nonit. I'm a IB senior. I go to the same school as Maggie and Isabella. I'd consider myself a STEM student. I love to code, do science, and other stuff like that. Um, yeah, I have a job as an AI engineer currently, and
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
that's me.
we're very glad that you're employed, Nana. We're very happy for you.
hmm
It's so cool.
We're not here to talk about his coding today, although that is very cool and you can ask him about it if you want to. We're here to talk about male allyship and why that's so important to feminism. So we're gonna start off by throwing you right into the deep end and making you play a game for us. We're gonna set a
Okay.
timer for 60 seconds, and you have to name as many ways that men can be allies in 60 seconds. Try to make these creative. They can be as wild as you want, they can be as crazy as we want, as long as you just try to get as many out there as we can. At the end, we'll choose our favorites. Do you think you're ready?
I can try my best.
Okay, Isabella, cut him off right at 60. Three, two, one,
Excited.
go.
Um, Recommend women for opportunities you can take. Speak up for women in meetings if they're ever cut off. Um, Notice when like a woman or somebody like that is being excluded and like speak up for them. Don't participate in any sort of sexist jokes or stuff like that and actually like speak out and say that's not right. Um, Read women's literature and support it and like any woman's created media.
Halfway mark.
Um, Speak up when you notice something is like off and not like equal. For example, like a judging panel, for example, is all male, stuff like that, and say like, oh, why don't we have like men and women on there?
Mm.
Um, watch women and men's sports. Um, Encourage your friends to also be allies, and not just like you,
Mm.
all your male friends as well,
Time.
and like tell them that it's
That's
okay.
60.
That is
Oh, that
Yep.
was really, really good.
Wow,
I
that
liked
was
it
he
a
got
lot.
nine. He got nine things. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. When I decided to play this game, I thought he'd have a lot more stupid ideas, but no, those were really good and really genuine, and I think set the podcast off to a really good start. Isabella, do you have a favorite that he mentioned?
Ooh, I think I liked what he said about speaking up when women are interrupted in
Mm-hmm.
meetings, especially in male-dominated spaces. That happens so much, and I feel like seeing males use their platform and kind of use their position to be able to uplift and open the door for women is a really beautiful thing.
I really like that
Yeah.
one too. My personal favorite, a bit niche one, but I really like mentioning giving men and women's sports an equal platform. I think we all saw this coming because women's sports deserve the viewership, and the more viewership they get, the more successful we're setting them up to be in the future. The WNBA is coming to Vancouver tomorrow at the time of filming this, so very, very relevant as of now. But I think after all these examples that he's thrown out of ways you can be a male ally, let's try to like come up with a little definition. Nana, what would you say a male ally is?
Yeah, for sure. So I think to be a male ally basically means, as Isabella said, is to use your platform to sort of open the door for other women and in your own way fight for equality, whether that be like through some small actions or it could be something larger. Everything helps, right? So, and yeah, just opening the door for them and not like doing it performatively, for example, for your own personal gain.
That's such a good point. Like being actually genuine and not performative,
Yeah.
not just like, those like matcha males that people make fun of all the time. But I'm curious, are there any like examples or stories you have of, seeing male allyship in your life as a man? Because we don't have like a male's perspective here, right? Let's get inside a man's brain.
Uh, sure. So I think this was a couple of days ago. I was walking home from the park with a couple of my friends, and one of my friends, he said a joke, or he meant it as a joke, at least it's not a joke, that about rape for his ex-girlfriend. No surprise she's his ex. Um, but yeah, so like what I did there was like speak up, say like, hey, you can't say that. I know he didn't really wish rape upon her, but that's not something you can joke about. So that's like one small example of male allyship.
I really like that because it points out that a lot of the time these comments are seen as jokes. Like, even if your friend isn't
Mhm.
necessarily like the spawn of Satan or something, just because no one might have like pointed that out that you shouldn't really say that in the past, it's something that's more normalized. So, guys, being an ally can just mean saying, hey, don't say that.
Yeah, just pointing it out has so much impact. So I love that story.
hmm So we kind of like mentioned already easy ways to be an ally, right? You mentioned through the game, like how to support the women in your life, giving them a platform, just like letting people let them talk, just kind of giving women space, holding space for women. And this doesn't seem, at least to me, like a big giant task. But becoming an ally can seem like a daunting thing for a lot of young boys. So what do you think some of like the barriers to male allyship is? What do you think is holding boys back from identifying as being like necessarily a feminist?
Yeah, so I think like the first one, like you already mentioned this, was that it seems like such a daunting task. Like when you say, oh, you have to be a feminist, like sometimes that comes with like the context that, oh, you have to like go march in these rallies and stuff like that, like for feminism, but really it could just be like very small things that just such as just speaking up, for example, like just small actions like that are considered as allyship and being a feminist and helping equality. And that's not generally known. Like when like even for me in the past when I used to hear like, oh, you have be a feminist, I used to think, oh, does that mean I have to like, I don't know, wear all pink and go to like attend like feminist parades and stuff? But it's really just like even the small actions count.
Mhm. What do you think kind of made you realize that being a feminist wasn't that big, scary march in the streets concept that you used to think it was?
I think, well, one for example is the podcast you guys are doing. And
Oh,
Yay.
having you guys as my friends, hearing your opinions and thoughts on this like really helped educate me on it. So I think yeah, that's just the biggest thing, just spreading awareness and podcasts like these make a big difference.
oh, it makes me so happy.
That is so
Oh my
sweet.
gosh.
But yeah, I really like that you mentioned how just having that conversations, like with female friends, with women can be so perspective changing. And I think one thing that me and Isabella have kind of talked about, call us out if we're wrong, we're not males here again. You're the guest, you're the star, is how the rise of toxic masculinity can be holding back guys from having these open conversations about feminism. So, do you mind talking a little bit about how you see toxic masculinity? Like, what does toxic masculinity mean to you?
I think what that means is like there's this idea that to be a man means to be very that macho type, very aggressive. So like sort of when people try to like be that person and fit into this mold and they fear that it's the only acceptable way to be a man, so then that's what like causes toxic masculinity in the first place. I think so that's sort of what it means, and like trying to always be very dominant, suppressing all your emotions, being aggressive. I'd say
Mm.
that's what toxic masculinity is.
How do you
And
feel like with
yeah.
what you've seen in your circles, like how can males be supported to kind of move out of this culture.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like to understand that the main thing that's just keeping them in that culture is the fear that it's the only way they'll be accepted, right? That if I don't follow these norms, I'm gonna be looked down upon, made fun of, or like bullied about it, right? So just surrounding yourself with better people, like having female friends as well, like you guys, for me, it helps you to see that that's not how you fit in and that there's other, just learning new perspective. And as Maggie said, having those conversations is the biggest way you could do it.
That is so nice. You're gonna make me emotional here. Um, but I guess like what you're saying is right. Like being this toxic alpha male is not the only way you can make friends. You know, there are a lot of people out there who will like you if you were just a genuine person, like genuine yourself. You don't have to be like over the top and macho to make friends. If you think that way, you can be our friend. You can be a friend of the Roast in the Ceilings podcast. We don't need you to be like that. But yeah, this kind of idea of like this whole macho culture reminds me a lot about the show Adolescence. I've not watched this show, but every time me and Isabella talk about toxic masculinity or the patriarchy, she lights up and she goes, "That's like the show Adolescence." So I'm gonna let her take it away for a moment and tell us what she means by that.
Okay, we are not sponsored by Netflix, first of all. I generally really like the show, and I think that everyone should watch it. I think that it should be showed in classes in schools because I think it really hits the nail on the head of what Nonit was saying about, you know, this kind of not feeling accepted and constant expectations of what being a man should mean. Um, and I feel like adolescence really captures it and showing how even like a 13-year-old boy can feel these expectations from like Andrew Tate culture and incel culture to want to be the stronger, more manly man and be able to claim women and kind of show their masculinity. And I think, you know, building men up to have this kind of confidence outside of this traditional view of masculinity.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you're so passionate about it because I think that just means that it's good media rep. And we haven't seen a lot of media rep about the impacts of toxic masculinity yet. Maybe whole alpha male thing is just a newer concept that people are talking about. I'm not sure, but like having a big show like that talk about it is really important because I don't think it's having us awareness at it as it is because I think we all have instances where we see toxic masculinity around us. So just one example I have, like just very quick. Like I have a lot of guy friends who, when you talk to them one on one, they're so nice, they're so genuine, they're so empathetic towards causes, social issues to other people. But when you place them in an echo chamber with other guys, these people who are like the nicest souls you can meet start saying things where you're like, I never knew that could come out of your mouth. And that applies to every single guy in that circle. So you're like, okay, now what's happening?
Like mine.
Yeah. Isabel, do you have any other examples of what where you think toxic masculinity kind of jumps out at you?
Oh, yeah, I think definitely it just hearing a lot of things from males in my circle about, you know, like their body counts or, you know, the way they're might be looking at women through a certain lens. So I think definitely looking at, you know, what males in their life that are a big influence on them and how is their relationship and lens on women because it all goes down to that like system level of, you know, what's being taught and what's being reinforced.
Yeah. What about you, Nona? Any other thoughts on just toxic masculinity, how we can battle it?
Yeah, I think another one could be, for example, in workplace cultures where often like the loudest and like the most aggressive voices, they're the ones who tend to only get heard and like thus rewarded. So like you're rewarding being super aggressive and like super loud at the cost of others. So like yeah, I think that's like one instance of like how this sort of propagates forward and like, you know, from a young age, boys being told or being like, "Oh, man up, don't cry." Like boys don't cry, right? That's for girls to do. Like that's a phrase I've heard in the past as well. So I think just like stuff like that can really help like reinforce this idea of like, alpha males, like Maggie said. So just working to change that and bringing awareness to it.
For sure. And with this whole like man up rhetoric that you mentioned, what do you think are some ways that we can move past that? Like as men, as women, how do we support each other to try to erase that kind of narrative?
That's a great question. I think that, well, for one, awareness is one thing, and then second, just trying to listen to like, for example, sports, for example, right? Instead of coaches telling their kids to be like, "Oh, don't cry about it, just tough it out," you could be like encourage coaches to like actually ask them what's wrong and be like more supportive overall. So in just like small places, I guess the effect sort of compounds the more and more you try and change things. It's eventually gonna start adding up. I don't know if that makes sense.
That does, for sure.
Just kind of wrap up our conversation and kind of pull in a tie-in. A lot of you listening might be like, "Oh yeah, toxic masculinity does sound like a bad thing. Alpha male culture sounds pretty bad. What that got to do with feminism?" Right? So I think it's an important notion for us to kind of talk about that mechanism there, how toxic masculinity affects men and it affects women. This toxic masculinity culture is negatively impacting all of us, and that leads us back to the patriarchy. I think oftentimes when men think of feminism and sexism and the patriarchy, they're like, "Ugh, like I don't care about the patriarchy." But the patriarchy affects men too. Like when we talk about this culture, it does affect men. So Nana, do you have any insights for us on that about how the patriarchy can be affecting men just as much as it is affecting women?
Sorry, so affecting men, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one way could be emotional repression, for example. So like often what this like narrow window of like what it takes to be a man, it means to like not show your emotions, be super masculine, not cry or do anything like that. And I think that has a lot of long-term negative effects, not being able to like truly express and let out all your emotions, just like bottling it all up. And yeah, I think like the extra aggression, it just creates like more violence. And to men themselves, people who don't want to fit into that toxic masculine, who don't want to be this like idea of being toxic masculine, they might get bullied or like made fun of by other kids who are. So that, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's really insightful for me and Isabella to have, a male voice on the
Mhm.
podcast. Because again, just to remind everyone, this has never happened before. We've done episodes on alpha males before and Andrew Tate culture and the patriarchy. We've never had a man. So this is
Yeah,
really
I mean, just to wrap it up, thank you so much for coming on and,
Mhm.
advocating for male allyship and sharing your insights. And is there any last words you want to say to our audience
Maybe
today?
also to any of the men who could be seeing clips of this, like, what would you like to say to them to convince them that male allyship is good?
No, first, it's just a huge honor to be here. I'm so honored to be the first male on this podcast. I hope I didn't let you guys down. Um, to the male viewers, I would say just do this, even the small actions count, and don't be afraid to just speak up once in a while.
I love.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Nonit.
Nonit. Everyone say bye.
Bye bye.